Daf Tet Amud Aleph and Amud Bet. Comfort in mastery. Shein Darkan shel bnei Adam lרכוב בעיר. What we're talking about here is how to demonstrate ownership, how to demonstrate mastery. We have relationships with the things around us, whether they're inanimate objects or they're other forms of situations where we have a relationship of ownership. Very often we have to determine, am I the gavra or am I the chefza? Am I leading this relationship or am I being led in this relationship? And that applies not only in relationships with people, it applies in relationships with things as well. Do I really own my cell phone? Am I leading my cell phone? Or am I being led by my cell phone? It's a really important question as to how we interact with the things around us. Do I act like the balabos? Do I act like the owner? Or every time it pings, I pick it up and I go and I run as if I'm a servant and this is my master. Very often our relationship to the things around us are not one of ba'alut. And kinyan is a demonstration of shlita. When we're talking about a kinyan, what we want the person to do is to demonstrate that he is the master of this object. To demonstrate that he owns this object. It's no longer owned by nobody. If it's a Metzia, he just found it. Or it's no longer owned by somebody else. It's owned by him. What does that mean? What does that act of ownership mean? We had a friend in Los Angeles who was a big wine connoisseur, and once he had us for dinner and opened the most amazing bottles of very old Yarden wine that were just beyond. And he coached us in how to drink that kind of quality of wine, because kosher wine drinkers don't often get the chance to drink that kind of quality of wine. And one of the things in the process of the coaching was, when you swirl the glass around to go and to get the flavor around, he said, swirl it as if you own it. Hold your glass as if you own it. Because that changes your relationship and that enables you to find things, to appreciate things that you otherwise wouldn't. So defining ownership not as a legal status but as a form of relationship is really important. Does a man relate to his wife as if she's just some strange girl that he's going on a date with? Or does he relate to his wife that he's a Baal and she is Ishtor, that they have investment and relationship and mastery? How does one relate to the people around one, to the things around one, to the objects in our lives? And we're going to understand that from this wonderful piece of Gemara, once again, that we have at the bottom of Daf Tes. We've been talking about the possibility of a rider, somebody sitting on a horse, being able to be koneh. Does that demonstrate mastery? So now in the framework of what we've just discussed, does sitting on a horse, is that sufficient of a demonstration of ownership? And we've been discussing that, and we have Shmuel holds that it is, and the Gemara says, Toshma, bring you a proof, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Rachuv b'sadeh umanhig ba'ir. If a person is riding a horse in the city, in the field, or in the city, he's leading the horse. Kana, that's a good kinyan. So what do we want to see from here? What does that teach us? That it would seem to be that there are cases where Rachuv works. So why did Shmuel say, no, I'm sorry, Shmuel didn't say that it is a kinyan. Shmuel said it isn't a kinyan. Why did Shmuel say it's not a kinyan? Hachanami says the Gemara, manhig b'raglav. We're not talking about just sitting passively on top of a horse. That's not ownership. Just to sit on a horse, you get plonked on top of a horse. It doesn't mean it's your horse. When you're using your legs to squeeze the horse so that the horse moves forward, that's ownership. And manhig says the Gemara, but in that case, that's the same as manhig. What does the Gemara say? It says if you're riding in the field or you're leading it in the city, that's leading it. You're causing the horse to walk. That's not rochav. That's not just sitting on top of the horse. Trei gavni manhigi. There are two different kinds of leading a horse. You can lead a horse with the reins, or by calling it, or by hitting it, and you can lead a horse by sitting on it and using your legs to drive it. So then in the city, why shouldn't it work? If you're causing the horse to move, that's meshicha. That's one of the best kinyonim that there can be for an animal. You're actually driving the horse. Why shouldn't it work in the city? She'en darkan shel bnei Adam lרכוב בעיר. Because it pasnit to ride in the city. Pasnit is a difficult word to translate. It's not appropriate. People don't do that kind of thing. Says Rashi, why not? En darkan mishum tzniuta. It's not tznius, so we'll understand in a moment what that is, but for whatever reason, it's not done. So what if it's not done, but he did it? Why would that not work? So here again we see this idea that when you're doing something that isn't done, which isn't normal, which isn't appropriate, how do you do it? Do you do it as an owner? Or do you do it a little bit surreptitiously? You're looking over to see if anybody's looking, if anybody's watching. To do something in a way where you're looking to see if anybody's watching you, that's not ownership. That's not bailus. That's not shlita. Amar le Rav Ashi Rav Kahana elameyata igbiya arniki b'Shabbat she'en dרכן של בני אדם להגביה arniki b'Shabbat achenami delo kani. So Rav Ashi challenges Rav Kahana. Rav Kahana is the one who said this is because of tzniut. Asks because of ein dרכן של בני אדם. It's not appropriate. It's not pasnit. Asks Rav Ashi, so what happens if a person picks up a wallet of money? On Shabbos, he's walking in the street and he can't resist. There's a wallet of money on the street and he wants to pick it up. He picks it up, leaving aside the Isu Shabbos thing. Is it a kinyan? Why not? Because you're not allowed to do it on Shabbos. So the Meforshim get quite concerned about this comparison. When we're talking about, it's not done, it's not appropriate, riding a horse in the city. Here we're talking about halacha. We're talking about an isud, at least an isud d'Rabbanan, a prohibition of the rabbis that you can't pick up a purse. It's muktzah. So that's completely different. How do you compare the cases? But the Gemara accepts the comparison. We'll come back to it later. Elomai de'ovad, ovad. V'kani, achenami mai de'ovad, ovad v'kani. What do we say with Hilchos Shabbos? Yeah, you shouldn't have done it. You're not supposed to pick up a purse on Shabbos even in the street, even if it's got hundreds and hundreds of dollars in it. But he did. So from the perspective of kinyan, it's a good kinyan. So here too, you're not supposed to ride horses in the city, but he did. So what? Let it be a good kinyan. But here we're not dealing about finding a horse in the street that doesn't belong to anybody or finding a purse. Here, in the case of the horse, we're dealing with mekach or memka, with a sale, a transaction. He says specifically, I want you to make a kinyan in this horse using a method that is normal for people, a normal kind of method. What does that mean? The Gemara goes on to say, if you're standing in Rishus Harabim, if he is an Adam Choshuv, if he's an important person, a person with dignity, who kani, then he can buy, because dignified people do ride their horses in the city. Rashi learned it a little bit different from the Girsa that I learned it with, which is the Girsa of the Vilna Gaon. Let's go Rashi's way. Rishut Harabim hu kani. If it's in Rishus Harabim, then the kinyan works. Why? If it's Be'ir, you're in the city, and it's a Rishus Harabim. We don't have many Rishus Harabims in cities, but imagine a really busy street in Rishus Harabim. You're on the Ayalon in Tel Aviv. The derech lרכוב sham v'lo lahanhig. If you're riding a horse on the Ayalon, you don't lead it by the rein. You get onto the horse and you drive it as fast as you can. Because if you're leading it, cars are going to get between you and the horse. It's not going to be a good scene. So if you're in a busy main thoroughfare, it's normal to ride your horse. You don't worry about sniut and things like that. If he's an Adam Choshuv, if he's a dignified, important man, he rides his horse even if there isn't traffic. Not just on the Ayalon in Tel Aviv, but even if he's riding down Rothschild in Tel Aviv, he rides on his horse. He doesn't draw the horse. It's fascinating to walk down Rothschild drawing your horse. What kind of a Tel Aviv resident are you if you did such a thing? You get onto your horse and you ride down Rothschild as well. The same with a woman that doesn't walk drawing the horse. And if he's a cheap person, he's not a dignified person. He's the average Joe that lives in Israel or in anywhere else. He rides in the city, outside the city. He wears sandals in shul, out of shul, in front of the prime minister, not in front of the prime minister. He's got no sensitivities to place and situation. He just does his thing. He's not tzanua. He doesn't understand tzniut. Aval adam beinoni. So he also rides. It doesn't matter where it is. But this whole statement of I want you to buy this horse with a kinyan that is normal for people. We're talking about adam beinoni. He's not very wealthy, and therefore and he's not afraid to walk down Rothschild leading his horse. It's okay. On the Ayalon, he'll ride his horse because it's dangerous to draw the horse. On Rothschild, he doesn't mind drawing the horse, and certainly if there are no people around, he doesn't mind riding the horse either, because it doesn't look out of place. What's very interesting as an aside in this Rashi is how subjective and situational tzniut is. Now, there is a form of tzniut which is objective and absolute. If you can't walk around naked because of tzniut, it doesn't matter even if you're in a society that walks around naked, you can't do that. You can't walk into a shul without being properly clothed, even if you're in a situation where people don't wear clothes. That's because of tzniut. But most of tzniut is situational. You see how the Gemara goes, and Rashi explains it depends. And Adam Choshuv, for an important person, it's not against tzniut to ride his horse, to sit on his horse with all his regalia, walking through the street. That's what he normally does. It's not a lack of tzniut. For a person who's ziluta, he has no sense of dignity at all. It's also not an act of lack of tzniut. That's normal. That's what he does. So you see, an ordinary kibbutznik comes into shul in shorts and sandals. It's okay. That's what he does. It doesn't have that sensitivity. But an Odom Beinoni, a person in the middle, that's where those sensitivities do exist. There's a specific person. The important thing is just to see from this Gemara, as Rashi learns it, how situational tzniut can be. It's not just an objective thing. You need sleeves till here, and you need a neck till here, and you need, like people have made it today, certainly in the area of women's dress, which has become a major concern of religious Jewish men, and particularly Rabbonim, down to the millimeter. That's not what tzniut is about. Tzniut is situation. It's about who the person is, where the person is, what the situation of the person is. And it's quite difficult to understand that sensitivity because it's not legislated in a very objective way. There's something else very fascinating that happens here. And that is, there is a Rambam. But the Rambam says that everybody has a problem with the Rambam. From the time of the Rambam onwards. He says in Hilchos Shabbos, you find a wallet in the street and there's not a non-Jew nearby and there's no animal you can put it onto the animal. The Rambam gives you a way how to take the wallet home. You move 3 amot and then you stop, and you kick it another 3 amot and then you start. You can do it in a way where there's no issue. We're not even talking about your own wallet. You were walking in the street and Shabbos came and now you've got your wallet in your pocket. Where do you put it? Not only that, but even if you found the wallet in the street. Everybody says, but the wallet's muktzah. It doesn't make sense in the case of Metzia. The Nishmas Odom says. Now, the Nishmas Odom is the Chaye Odom. The Chaye Odom was the Rov of Vilna during the time of the Vilna Gaon. The Vilna Gaon's job was not to be the rabbi. It was not the community rabbi. And if you had a shaila as to whether your chicken was kosher or treif, you didn't go to the Vilna Gaon. There were Rabbonim, there were poskim in Vilna, many poskim. One of the main poskim at that time was the Chaye Odom, Rabbi Avram Danzig. And Rabbi Avram Danzig wrote the Chaye Odom, which is a wonderful sefer. The Chaye Odom, in 1 volume, he does what the Mishnah Berurah does in 6 volumes. In 1 volume, he's got the whole of Orach Chaim. And then in Chochmas Odom, he's got the whole of Yoredeh and parts of Choshen Mishpat. Everything a Jew needs to know about how to live is in 2 volumes. Chaye Odom, Chochmas Odom. And when my father was in yeshiva, the Mishnah Berurah had not yet become a bestseller. So people didn't learn Mishnah Berurah. If they wanted to learn in the halacha, say when the boys were learning halacha, they learned Chaye Odom. So I was raised on Chaye Odom before I met the Mishnah Berurah. The truth is, if you learn Mishnah Berurah, it's not very clear what the halacha is. If you learn the Chaye, isn't that right? I mean, you learn, no, what is he saying? Yes, no, this one says this, that one says that. Not very clear. You learn Chaye Odom, you know exactly what the halacha is. And then the Mishnah Berurah became very popular, and I want you to understand why that was. The truth is, if you want to know the halacha, still, the go-to sefer is the Chaye Odom. If you want to understand how you get to the halacha, the go-to sefer is the Aruch HaShulchan. So what is the Mishnah Berurah? Why is everybody learning Mishnah Berurah? What is it about Mishnah Berurah? What's interesting is that to change behavior, you need a few things to be in place. If you want to change a habit, you want to change behavior, you need information. You'll say you're smoking. You need the information that smoking is unhealthy, but that's not enough. You then need to establish an emotional relationship with the information. So this is what's only recently, since the 60s and 70s, has been discovered that information doesn't change behavior. You need to be emotionally engaged with the information. You need to be scared by the information of how smoking is dangerous. You need to feel the fear in your body. You need to tremble. That can bring you to stop smoking, and then you need practice. Over and over again, you've got to resist the cigarette until eventually it becomes normal behavior. Those are the 3 steps: information, emotional engagement, and practice. When you learn Chaya Odom, there's no emotional engagement. When you learn Chaya Odom, it's information. At Shabbos, I need to know, can I do this, can I do that? It's not about emotional engagement, it's about knowing the halacha. You open the Chaya Odom, in 2 seconds, you know exactly what the din is. The Mishnah Berurah creates emotional engagement. The Mishnah Berurah changes behavior. When you learn the Chaya Odom, you learn the facts, but you don't change the behavior. When you learn Mishnah Berurah, it changes who you are. It changes your relationship to the halacha. That's why I've always said the Mishnah Berurah is a Mussar Sefer. It's a Sefer in Yiras Shamayim. It's a Sefer in how to engage with halacha in an emotional way, in a spiritual way as well, not just in an intellectual way. So that's the Mishnah Berurah. And the Chaya Odom, he writes the Binas Odom is a perish, the bottom of the Chaya Odom. On this Rambam, he says the Rambam himself said, the Maggid Mishnah brings it, that the Rambam himself said, I don't really have a source for this halacha. I'm a little bit shaky on it. Says the Binas Odom, this Rashi is the source. Because the Chaya Odom learns that Ein Darkon Bishum Tzniuta, the bottom Rashi on Amud Aleph, isn't referring to the horse rider. The case of Ein Darkon Bishum Tzniuta is referring to the case of the Arnaki, is referring to the case of Shabbos. And you see that there's no Isur, there's no prohibition in picking up the person in this particular situation, according to the Rambam. Yes, it's an outlying view, but you see from Rashi that Ein Darkon Bishum Tzniuta, people don't pick up their purse because of tzniut. Says the Binas Odom, it's not because of tzniut, it's because of muktzah. So you see from this Rashi, it's not because of muktzah. And they all yell at the Chaya Odom. Starting with Rabbi Yisrael Heller. Rabbi Yisrael Heller was a talmid of Rabbi Chaim Volozhner, so he lived just after the time of the Chaya Odom. And he wrote a sefer called Nachlas Yisrael. And in that sefer, he was a Rosh Yeshiva in Mir Yeshiva, and in his sefer, he says, this is ridiculous to learn the Rashi this way. Rashi is not talking about the Aranak. When Rashi says Ein Darkon, because the word Ein Darkon appears twice. It appears in the case of the horse, and it appears in the case of Shabbos. It's not possible to say Ein Darkon is talking in the case of the Shabbos. Clearly, Ein Darkon is talking in the case of the horse, and when it comes to Shabbos, the purse is mukta, and that's what the Gemara is working about, and this is no source for the Rambam. That's what they say, but if we understand how we opened the shir today, the whole flow of the Gemara, if you look at the Gemara from a perspective of flow, you understand where the Chaya Odom is coming from. This is all about demonstrating mastery and ownership. So it's not proper to drive a horse on Shabbos. Rashi doesn't tell us why. It comes later on. It's to drive a horse in the city. You don't do that. You're in the city, you walk, you don't drive your horse through the streets of the city. That's not the way to do it. It's not the derech eretz. It's ein darka. It's not the way. What about the Anak on Shabbos? Even if you hold that it's not muktzah, you find a wallet on Shabbos in the street, even if you hold it's not muktzah, as the Rambam seems to hold, and that theoretically you could handle it, it's still, there's a question of tzniut. People look at you and you're picking up this wallet full of money on Shabbos. It doesn't look right. It's not Shabbosdik. You've got a source for the idea of Shabbosdik. Halachically it's okay, but it doesn't look so good. So how do you pick it up? You pick it up looking over your shoulder. That's not a kinyan. To demonstrate mastery and ownership over the physical things around us, you need to handle the things around you as a master, as an owner of the things around you. You own your cell phone, you own your computer, you own the furniture in your house. Treat it as an owner, and an owner doesn't look over his shoulder to see who's watching, and he's looking. That damages the force of the kinyan and diminishes our sense of relationship to the things around us as that of owners.